Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with writer, thinker, and seeker Douglas Robbins. He began his writing career at a young age when one of his teachers asked the class to write a poem. In that moment, he found a power in words that he has never found anywhere else. He grew up, attended college, then joined the workforce, but continued to write in his spare time. Frustrated with one dead-end job after another, he finally decided to take his chances with the only profession that ever made sense. He left a thankless corporate job after years of waking up sick and dreading each day. These days, he is living his dream near the Catskill Mountains with his wife and family. Enjoy this interview.
Joe, how do you do, sir? How are you?
Hey, I'm good. How's life?
Good, man. Good. Always trying to fight the good fight. Not always easy, but always trying to.
Oh, yeah. You got to live the dream. I hear you, man. You know?
Yeah. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm good. Where are you located at?
New York, about 2 hours north of the city, just outside the Catskill Mountains.
I got you. Okay. How far away from Long Island is that?
Far enough for me to never want to go there.
I got you. Okay.
No. We're, again, probably about 2 hours from Long Island, but Long Island, if you're asking, you know, it's hell to get to, and traffic galore, and yeah.
Yeah. My dad grew up there. He was born in Brooklyn, raised in Long Island. So sometimes I have a hard time realizing where things are geographically up there. So that gives me a measuring stick, so to speak. But at any rate, thanks for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be speaking with you today. Thank you for reaching out to me. And also interesting, my mother grew up in Brooklyn, never lived on Long Island, but moved she wanted to get out of Brooklyn because she wanted trees. Yeah.
Well, and I guess that's the whole idea is that, Long Island is kind of the suburbia, and that was what they did too. They wanted to get out of the city and get something that, kind of was their own little empire. So it made the most sense for them. So,
and I think 50 years ago was probably, heavenly to live on Long Island, but there's just obviously too many people there now,
Yep, everything's overcrowded for sure. So before we get into your life as a writer, thinker, and seeker, I'm curious, how did COVID change you? I mean, it was quite a tumultuous 2 years on the planet. How did it change you? What happened as a result now that we're kind of coming out of things?
Well, it's curious because I don't know how much COVID really changed me. It didn't really affect my life that much because I do still have a full-time job, but I mostly work from home anyway. My wife also works from home, so didn't really change us in that way. I mean, we probably weren't the most social people to begin with, meaning we weren't like going out and having, meeting couples nights and those kind of things. So probably didn't really change me in many ways. I've always feel so bad for people to wear masks, all day long, and we'd go to restaurants and wear a mask or whatever. But yeah, it didn't really affect me in that way. It affected some of my perspectives on things, on how the world is changing and how something like this can cause such a ripple effect. But didn't really change me as far as a day-to-day because, again, I wasn't really out and about, working in an office or something anyway.
So if you were in front of a career day of fifth graders and a kid looks up to you and says, what do you do? What do you do on a daily basis? What's your job? How would you answer that?
Honestly, Joe, it's always loaded for me, man, because I'm a writer, podcaster, trying to live sort of that more inspired, spiritual life, if you will. And then you have the grind of making a buck because the writing isn't paying enough to pay the bills. So it's always a hard one for me. I mean, people ask me, what do you do? And I tell them I'm honestly a property adjuster as well. And, in a million years, I never would have thought, I'd be working in insurance as a property adjuster. It's stable, it pays the bills, and hopefully one day I can say goodbye to it. But so it would be a loaded answer, or I would just put on the smiley face and just talk about the writing and following your dreams and that kind of thing.
Speaking of following your dreams and being a writer, take me back to the beginnings of your life, where you were born and raised, and kind of how you got this motivation to write. And you're a pretty busy guy. How did all this start for you?
Well, it's curious because I was never much for school. I always, never felt like I belonged there. Something felt like wrong with the water, if you would. And I felt like they were trying to indoctrinate me. Even at a young age, I kind of had that sense that they were trying to indoctrinate me into something that I didn't really want to be a part of. And so I wasn't a great reader when I was a kid. I was not a great student. I really kind of rejected it all in many ways. But I was always deeply connected to nature, very rooted in nature and sort of that simpler, broader existence. And so I was always intuitive and had a lot of ideas and insights about things. But as a kid, you're kind of just trying to navigate and make it through. So I didn't really understand sort of that deeper stuff until I was a little more conscious of it, maybe sort of later teens, in my later high school years. A teacher had asked us to write a poem, and I had never felt tremendously confident as a kid, or great self-esteem. And so the teacher had asked us to write this poem, and I wrote this kind of funny little poem. And the last line was, "Religion is the lifelong betrayal. All you do is put a lot of money in the mail," or something like that. And my father had liked the poem, and he, which wasn't sort of usual for him to give me that, hey, attaboy kind of thing. The class laughed at it, and I found sort of this power in words that I had never understood anywhere else. Kind of more of just sort of floating through, my school days. So this was something like grounding me, like, oh, there's something to this. And then I was in a little bit of a band, never made it out of my bedroom, but there would be like 5 of us jamming in there, and it's like 10 by 10 room. But I would write lyrics, and my mother would laugh at some of the lyrics, thinking they were just much too heavy for some teen to be writing. But that's kind of where it started, was just sort of connecting thoughts, emotions, feelings to words, to that external world, and sort of making some sort of semblance or sense out of it all.
So, you talked about spirituality, and I'm curious, seeking spirituality, sometimes we have our own dose of empiricism. We have moments where we're like, yeah, there's no doubt that there's an existence of a creator or a greater being.
Yeah.
Have you had moments like those in your life?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, many. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there any, is there one in specifically, you don't have to get into all of them, but is there one that stands out that you would be willing to share?
Well, yes, absolutely. So and I was actually, I had a podcast yesterday, and then I interviewed a woman. So I have a podcast called The Den of Discussion as well. We talk about these type of things, and she's a medium, a psychic, et cetera. And so we were talking about, I said, how come sometimes you hear things loudly? An idea, for instance, I play softball, and I was going to, I never wear a hat. It's at night. I was like, well, and the other night it was like, something came into my head, said, oh, you should bring a hat. Like, why would I bring a hat? It's night, the sun's gone down, I don't need a hat. So as soon as we got to the game and started playing, it started raining, and I was like, oh, that's why I needed a hat. And so sometimes we'll have information that comes kind of quietly, but sometimes it's like someone shouting at us. So I will tell you the time that someone shouted at me. And I still don't really understand it, but I will tell you. So long ago, probably 20 years ago, I was standing in a line at a bank, and it was sort of just a bank that had just a counter in a supermarket. So there was no like room or office you went into, it was just within the supermarket. So staying there, and I got my little money, whatever transaction I did, and then I took a few steps off, and something yelled in my ear, "Turn around," very loudly. And I looked at the line, and there was a guy 2 or 3 people back, kind of looked like me, had blue eyes, I had brown eyes, but sort of similar body type. And then that voice said, "He's your brother." And it still gives me chills to this day, because I just stood there, like dumbfounded. I didn't know what to do. I'd never had a voice speaking to me in this way. And I just sort of stared at the guy like, okay, and like I didn't know what to do about it. If I had, my wherewithal, I would have said, hey, do I know you, or have we met before, or something, like sort of finding an opening, if you will. You can't obviously just go up to someone and say, hey, are you my brother? So I never understood what that meant. It was just so out of left field. And more recently, my aunt, so my father's passed away about 10 years ago. My mother passed away about 20 years ago. My aunt recently, is about 5 years younger than my father, had said, you probably don't know this, but your father had been married briefly before your mother. But she thought it was annulled just after a few days. So she wasn't saying there was a child or anything like that. But it was so loud and specific and blunt, like screaming at me. So just a few days ago, I ordered Ancestry.com kit because I need to know the answer. There was one other time, if you want me to share. You still there?
Absolutely, you bet.
Oh, okay. So I've had a lot of times where smaller things happen, but this other time, these two really stand out. It was another time, probably late teens, 20, something like that. I was with some friends at night in a park in their town, so I had never been to this park before. And we had walked up this little hill, this grassy hill. And again, I'd never been there before, so I had no idea of the terrain. So we walked up this little hill, or what I thought was a little hill, and we're on top of this hill, like 4 or 5 of us, and I had the idea that I was going to run and jump off of it. I thought it was like 10 or 15 feet high,
Yeah.
So I was starting to go. I was about to push off and go. And something in my head shouted, don't, or don't jump, or whatever. And I stopped. And so we just hung out the rest of the night, and the next day we went back to this park, and I could see this hill now during the day. And I was going to jump off the front of it. Well, the front of the hill had nothing but jagged boulders sitting at the bottom of it. And we were probably 40 or 50 feet up. So I would have been obviously in bad shape, paralyzed or worse, or God knows what. And so this is something outside the mind, outside experience, outside any of my realm of awareness. And so something obviously beyond me or outside of me, some guide or spirit or whatever you want to call it, protected me.
Absolutely.
And, it gives me chills to this day whenever I think of that, because it's so terrifying to me of what would have happened had there been no voice telling me to stop.
Wow. So in your life, sometimes we are only as good as those that we look up to. Who have been role models or heroes for you?
That's a good question, because it was certainly not anyone in my family. Even though my parents were good people, they weren't role models to me. My father was a good man, but again, kind of failed in certain ways, as all people will, because we're all human. We all have our shortcomings. I think in some ways, some of the big people, the Martin Luther King type of people in the world, the people that are bold and daring and what would appear to be fearless, they are not fearless. They just have courage. There is no such thing as courage without fear. And so Martin Luther King, Hemingway, as a writer, I guess those type of people. And I studied martial arts for many years. So there was a gentleman by the name of Musashi Musoto. He was a sword fighter samurai, and he had written a book, The Book of Five Rings, and basically he was explaining in life is like, you will lose every fight if you don't know yourself or your opponent. If you know yourself and not your opponent, you will win 50%. But if you know both, you will win 100%. So I think some of the philosophies, Buddha type stuff. But I'm not really thinking of anyone per se, Henry Miller as a writer, because he wrote such raw prose. Anything that was just so blunt and direct and honest I was always attracted to that as a writer and as a reader.
You said that corporate America, you just got to the point where you had to get out. And I know I've been in that boat before. Was there one moment, a moment that you just were like, I can't do it and I got to get out?
In what, corporate America?
Yeah. Was there a moment where
there have been many moments, Joe. There have been many moments. You know, it's funny because sometimes we have demons and we don't know it. And they're the ones kind of, the pain can make us do many things. And one is not always think straight. But yeah, I mean, it's funny. When I first started, I've been with 3 companies now. And when I first started, I had made some bad choices leading up to it. I kind of stopped believing in writing. I was living in New York City at the time, and just things didn't happen the way I had kind of hoped, and kind of lost faith in writing, in myself, in God, and in anything that's out there, and anything beyond me. Lost faith in it, that I thought life was just sort of a lie. And so I made some bad choices, and ended up working in a warehouse, and I was so desperate to get a better job, and I would literally, I'm not a religious person, but I would pray, and just like my intention was so acute, eventually I was able to get this job. It was almost to a T what I had asked for. At the time, I'd asked for $40,000 salary. This was 15 years ago. $40,000 salary, benefits, and a car. And I got this job making $41,500 benefits and a car. But strangely though, it seemed so contrarian to who I was, such contrast. So I was never a corporate guy. I was never looking to kind of climb corporate ladder or whatever. Ever even thought I would have been in corporate America. So I go to this job, have my little, button-down shirt. There's a sea of endless cubicles in this building. And I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, one part of me was already out the door, the 1 foot in, 1 foot out. But I stayed there because of necessity. So a few years goes by, and all sorts of corporate games and numbers. And it never sat well. It was a tough job. And again, a lot of manipulation from the company. And I just reached such a bottom. I was so exhausted emotionally and mentally, being drained by dealing with people, dealing with the games of the company. At some point you just feel like there's no place for you. And though this was the 2008-2009 market crash or recession, I quit the job. I can't, it's either this or suicide, and I'm just going to leave the job here. Because I was in such a dark, exhausted place. Because it was sort of hitting up against those emotions of like, well, why are you even here? You're here for the money. Yeah, but you should be doing something more with yourself. Well, why are you here? You're still here. You're stuck in this. Get out of this. And so I didn't, I had 10 grand in the 401k or so. I don't even know, like a few grand in savings, no real means. And what was curious, like I reached this point of just utter desperation, sheer exhaustion. And I went to the VP, who was a decent man, but he ran this huge, regional area. And I said, look, I would like unemployment. And I wrote this sort of lengthy letter as to why they misled me and us as employees and how they're manipulating us and the numbers, et cetera, et cetera. And I wasn't saying it to be a jerk or to be manipulative. I was saying, look, you guys said the job was this, but then it became this. I said, that's a problem. You're asking us to do basically double the work. You're not paying us double. And so he was so impressed with the letter. He didn't want me to quit. He wanted me to do something else in the company. But ultimately they gave me unemployment, which saved me because I didn't have any other means and I was so exhausted. And you know what I honestly did? So I quit the job. I was single at the time, put all my stuff in storage, gave up my apartment, hopped on my motorcycle, and rode across the country for 3 months.
If you could meet anybody alive on the planet right now, who would it be?
I'm going to give you a weird answer, and then I'll give you a straight answer. My higher self would be the first person, because that's the person I'm trying to get to, right? That's who I'm keep aspiring to be.
Yeah.
But then the next person would be like an Ed Milet type of person or a Tony Robbins. People who are, making a difference in people's lives and really kind of spreading the gospel of healing, of truth, of spirituality, and how to do it, how to, with the tools to improve. It's very easy to say, like, follow your dreams. Well, what does that mean? I mean, there's a disconnection there. How does one follow their dreams? It sounds easy, but it's not always easy in practice. It's easy to say a lot of things. It's the execution of things where the challenge comes in. So I think those kind of people, really just people that I feel like are high game, like they're really like, on top of their game, high achievers, and really living their best lives, because that's ultimately what we're trying to do. It's not about the money. It's about what is your purpose here, what is the meaning in your life, and how do you go about achieving it. And that, I think, is something that we fail in the workplace, we fail in education, because that's ultimately how we move forward, how you get the best individuals, the best citizens, the best, community and country then.
So everyone has a perception of you, your family, your friends, your readers, but you ultimately live your life. You have a perception of you. Who do you think you are?
I think I'm very earnest. There's a deep sense for me of that integrity matters. And not just to mean integrity, my word absolutely is my bond, but an integrity of honoring oneself. I think that's the key, because often we're not really taught or encouraged to do that. No, you have to adapt to the world and its demands and play these roles, etc. So I think most people would say, pretty smart guy, whatever, well-meaning, but earnest and deeply, deeply cares about people and the earth and life itself.
Beautiful, man. So if anybody wants to get your books, learn more about you, anything in your life and world, where can they go on the web?
DouglasRobbinsAuthor.com, or you could find my books on Amazon. Coming out with another one soon. But yeah, Love in a Dying Town came out last year, and then my sci-fi book, Narracon, The Cloak Deception, came out a year or so before that, and I have a new Narracon coming out in a few months. So, and if anyone goes to my website, you get a free story if you sign up for the newsletter.
Beautiful, man. Douglas, thank you for taking some time out today, man. I appreciate it.
Joe, it's been such a pleasure. You have a good day.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, and music around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.